Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com presents the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 268 of the Strength Coach Podcast, the official podcast of Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com, the world's best source for strength and conditioning information, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com. I'm your host, Anthony Renna. The show notes are located at my site, ContinueFit.com. It's also where you can find out more about my new book, Be Like the Best, and the Be Like the Best workbook. The book consists of 50 interviews with top fitness pros. After each interview is a Be Like, which is just an action step or a challenge that will help you be like the best. The workbook actually gives you room for notes. You can write down stuff. So it's just like a condensed version of all the Be Likes. You can go to ContinueFit.com or BeLikeTheBest.com to check all that stuff out. All right, today on the Coach's Corner with Coach Boyle, I spoke to Coach Boyle about getting better in season. He did a couple of coaches minutes with that. The Tony Holler idea of the Gauntlet, and the biggest obstacle in the strength and conditioning field right now. For the Results Fitness University Business of Fitness segment, I'm on with Elias Scarr again to continue his series on sales. Today we're going to go deeper into the 3-part strategy session, and we're going to talk about filling out the par queue with the prospect. Very cool way that they do it at Results Fitness. For the Functional Movement System segment, Eric DeGotti's on to talk about rescreening, when to do it, how often, and with whom. For the Train Heroic Data-Driven Coaching segment, Adam Doughty talks to Tim Robinson about a pretty hot topic right now, and that's load management, something that's really going on a lot in the NBA. Don't forget, check out trainheroic.com to start your free 14-day trial. Let them know I sent you. You'll save 10% off your first year of the Train Heroic Pro or Lead Edition. Today, for the Body by Boyle online.com, hit the gym of the Strength Coach segment, I have on Caleb Heilman. Caleb owns Heilman Performance in Minot, North Dakota. And part of what he does there, he also works with Minot State University and the Minot public school system. So I thought this is such an interesting story. He went to Minot State and then talked to him about, becoming a coach there. He opened his own place, and then how he came to really work with the university as a strength and conditioning coach, not really in the traditional sense. So they're actually contracting out that work, and then that led to contracting out some public school system work. I thought this is a great episode for people who are really in that same situation. They have a facility, you want to work with high school or college local, they might not have a strength coach. This is a great way to think about it. I talked to him also about the differences between the private sector and working with high school and college athletes, how the contracts have become a feeder not only for business but for staff. We talked about overtraining in college sports and a pretty unique solution to give athletes autonomy. We talked about that and so much more coming up with Caleb. Lots of things to get to, so let's get on the phone with Coach Boyle. All right, now it's time for the StrengthCoach.com Coach's Corner with Coach Boyle. StrengthCoach.com, the world's best source for strength and conditioning information. You can try it out for 3 days. Just $1. You'll have access to all the articles, videos, and programs, as well as the best forum on the net. It's the only place to have full access to Coach Boyle. He's on every single day. Check it out at StrengthCoach.com. Coach, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Anthony. How are you? We're actually on the phone today. Busy morning at Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning, so I'm in between spots.
Always good. Always good to be busy. Coach, let's get right into it. You did a Coach's Minute on getting better in season, and you were talking about, some guys were saying, look, we can only get like 1 15-minute workout in a week, or, they're so focused on recovery, and your guideline was about 2 hours during the season strength and conditioning. Basically you were saying don't physically go backwards. My question to you on that one, though, is, isn't that just maintaining? I know that's the bottom line. I just wanted you to come on and really expand a little bit more than the minute on this, because I don't want people to think that you were just saying, hey, just maintain. You were saying at the very least maintain, but we can get stronger in season.
Right, exactly. But at the very least maintain. My point is that at the very least don't get worse. Like I used to look at my BU guys all the time, like, because you get guys for 4 years. and you think, all right, I want this guy. My goal is that, that he gains 20 pounds, that he gains 5 pounds a year, and that he gets faster, and that he gets stronger. And one of the things that I realized was the guys that had the most difficulty were the guys that did the worst job in season. So the guys that just, whatever, maybe they played more minutes, maybe they just weren't as motivated, whatever it was. But when guys went backwards, those were the guys that really struggled, guys that couldn't keep their weight on, guys that didn't keep their strength up, had the most difficult time. And the guys that made the most progress over a 4-year career were obviously the guys who did the best job of never going backwards. And so I guess that was my point. Yes, I always think I don't like the idea of a maintenance program, because I think a maintenance program is accepting a low bar. But I also think the flip side of that is that in the worst case scenario, we want maintenance. And obviously I was talking to another strength and conditioning coach. I won't mention the name of the school, but he said, yeah, I just got my women's soccer people back. And, it's tough because they were only getting in for 15 minutes once a week. And I was just like, how can coaches do this? Because I heard a great Jeff Blashill, who's the Red Wings coach, one time. I watched him do a talk on hockey development. And he was talking about the fact, he said, the number one way to make your team better is to make your existing players better. And that really stuck with me. I thought, and even though it's a simple statement, I was like, he's so right. You got to focus on making the people that you have there right now better. Not worrying about who you're recruiting or who's going to transfer, or in the pros, who you can trade for or whatever it was. But can I make my guys better? And I think as a strength and conditioning coach, you need to focus in on that spot and look at it and think, okay, how do I make the guys that I have better? And the number one way to make them better, don't let them get worse. It sounds stupid, but it's true.
Yeah. Coach, let me ask you though, how did some guys, you guys are coming in as a team. How did some guys, isn't that your responsibility? How did they go backwards if like you said, some guys didn't do a good job in season? How did you let that happen, or how did that happen?
Well, the problem is it does. It's the reality is that 20 guys come in and you can try to watch 20 guys, but the reality is you can't. Yeah. And there are some guys who are kind of low motor guys, low motivation guys, and they may be high talent. It's not always, I always say you look at all your guys and everybody's got different sort of quantities or skills, and some guys just may not work as hard. And you may look at it and think, and maybe a guy just gets dinged up a little and all of a sudden he's like, I really can't do this because of my shoulder or whatever it is. There's a lot of variables that come in, but yeah, ultimately, is it your fault? Yes. But realistically, in a team setting, you're going to control, like I always looked at it, freshmen are easy. They're always going to get better because most of them come in with very little experience, very little training age. And so they make improvement, no problem. But your upperclassmen, your sophomore, junior, senior guys, they're going to come in and they're going to know the system a little bit better and they're going to have a better idea. I can remember guys where, and again, I won't name names. There was one guy, I used to waste my whole workout sometimes counting his reps and sets because I knew he wasn't doing stuff. And I knew we were going to have a confrontation. And I knew I was going to have to go to Coach Parker and say, blank is not doing what I wanted to do. And today I spent the whole workout, all I did was watch him. Now imagine how frustrating that is as a coach to realize that I'm going to spend our workout today watching one slacker because I need to catch him and make sure I'm absolutely certain that when I confront him, that I'm right. And but that's the kind of stuff you have to do. That's the reality of the team setting. It would be great if everybody was super motivated and couldn't wait to get stuff done, but that's just unrealistic, to be honest. In a team.
Yeah. Coach, you have a great 3-part article series for members right now. If you aren't doing speed training, we've been talking about this for a while. You kind of really summed it up in this 3-part series. I want to ask you something, though. Tony Holler posted this, you probably saw it on Twitter, a video of, they do it twice a year. They call it the Gauntlet. And he said, there's so many PRs that day. And basically, did you see the video, first of all?
I saw the video. Yeah, he talked about that. It's funny because he said, I asked him about that. And he said, that's the exception. And he said, just like a meet. And he said, he thinks for his guys, it prepares them for the hype of the meet setting kind of thing. My problem with that is I feel like if you don't, it goes back to the idea we always talk about. You can break the rules once you know them. So once you realize that you don't want people competing and you don't want to insert all these additional variables, then once you know that and you've got a controlled setting, like we could do that and say, okay, today's test day and we're going to line everybody up and everybody's going to cheer and we're going to get some personal best. But when you're trying to set forth a program idea for people, that's the stuff that people will look at that, like, oh, that's awesome, let's do that every week.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then looking at like, no, that's definitely not what you want. That's not going to get you what you want. You may stage fright some kids. You may get some kids to overextend themselves like this. There's going to be some things that will go wrong, probably more than will go right in that setting, particularly if you're not doing it with a bunch of kids that are really experienced and really prepared.
Okay. Yeah, just to remind everybody, if you didn't see the video, it was basically they were doing their time 10s and they had people on both sides, all the teammates just cheering them. And so they weren't racing. It wasn't they were obviously still racing against themselves. But like you said, I could see kids overextending themselves. And it's funny because there was somebody who asked the question, hey, how come only twice a year if it's so good? He thought, we want to make it special,
right.
So
yeah, and it's funny. So that's at PN Track on Twitter if people want to see it, so they can go look at Tony's Twitter.
It was cool. Coach, finish up with the somebody, who was it? Coach Me Plus had talked about what's the biggest obstacle in strength and conditioning right now. And you felt like it was coaching ego. And we need to be learners that put the athlete first. You really feel like there's not enough coaches out there trying to learn, trying to change, and just still doing the same program?
No, not as many as you think. It's really interesting. I had a great conversation today with Rob Oviatt today, who's a guy like me in his 60s, has been a bunch of places in his career as a Division I strength coach. And one of the things that he talked about was, he said they had Johnny Parker at the CSCCA, and he said there were guys, head strength coaches from Power 5 conferences that were out in the hallway talking when Johnny Parker was speaking. And he said, I was shocked that these guys wouldn't be in there in the front row thinking, wow, what an opportunity to hear one of the all-time greats in the field. So yeah, I do think, there's a lot there. There's a lot more ego, and when I look at the programming and the videos, and I will tell you that I see probably more bad than good as in general, and the good thing is it's getting better, but there's still a lot of people, it's just a hype show, and it looks like a revival meeting. It looks like everybody's at church instead of looking like, hey, this is really good quality strength and conditioning, and this is really good quality lifting. And so, yeah, I do think that ego. And if you look at the sideline antics and you look at the YouTube videos, I think there's a huge, we've gotten away from, I think the guys that I admired as a young guy coming up were people like Al Vermeil and Al Miller and Johnny Parker and Mike Wojcik. And I was thinking, none of those guys have ever been on the sidelines in a shirt that didn't fit, doing a dance for the players and acting like an idiot. And I look at that and think, what's the problem right now? The problem now is we got too many guys dancing and singing and rapping and doing whatever, and the programming is not very good. So yes, I would say that ego is a problem.
Okay. Yeah. No, I just was thinking more along because I thought about it too, and I thought, it's this kind of level, and it goes along the same lines, this level of professionalism. You just touched on it with, the meathead type of coach from that's left over that maybe played and now is doing what he did when he was an athlete. But I think it seems like we're starting to move away a little bit from that for when if we can have a little bit more respect for the industry and gain, if we're more professional, then we get more respect. And then we make more money, and then we bring better people to the job. Because if you're not making any money, let's be honest, we can all talk about, we want to do great, we want to help people change lives, but at the same time, we still need to get paid for that. And we're not going to get paid if we're just, like there was the guy, remember the one strength coach that had to keep pulling the coach? There was that video, he had to keep pulling the coach off of the.
Oh yeah. Yep,
I mean,
exactly.
we got to have a little more self-respect too for ourselves.
Well, that's the problem. We've become the hype man, the get back guy. Like if you look at how we're portrayed on television right now, we're portrayed as strength and conditioning coaches as either the get back guy, the guy who's pulling the coach off the field, or the hype guy who's doing a silly dance for the players on the sidelines. And we're not portrayed as professionals. And I look at that and think that that's ego, because that's somebody, you want to be part of the show. And I don't want you to be part of the show. I want you to be a professional. I want you to be somebody like the athletic trainer or the team doctor or the head coach themselves, who's respected for what they know, and not look and think, look at Mike, what a clown. Look at his dance moves. Look at his shirt. And that's the stuff that we're getting recognized for all the right things, all the wrong things rather right now.
Yeah. It's funny. I posted a picture of your Body by Boyle Online staff meeting, and you were telling everybody, don't be Marty Muscles with the Tupperware and the size, the shirt size 6 sizes too small, etc. It just reminded me of it. So, anyway, on that
note,
there
was one the other day on Twitter, a picture of a guy, the strength coach had cut the sleeves off his polo shirt to wear on the sideline.
Oh boy.
I was just like, oh my God, what are we, and I feel like this is what we're up against.
It's like a bad 80s frat house movie right there.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
All right, Coach. Well, on that note, I will let you go. Thanks for doing this, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right. Thanks, Ant. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, right now at Perform Better, don't miss the huge holiday sale, up to 30% off. So many items, free shipping on select items as well. They got sandbags, FMS kits, TRX, all kinds of rollers, kettlebells, dumbbells, and so much more that are on sale. Again, 30% off most items, and then free shipping on select items as well. Check out performbetter.com for all their products and info on their educational seminars.
Hi, this is Eric Agati from Functional Movement Systems doing our functional movement segment. And today what we're going to talk about is the topic of rescreening. You've done your initial functional movement screen. Now, how do I go about the process of retesting? When do I do it? How often do I need to do it? And who am I doing it with? So let's start with the time factor, which in teaching the FMS course for years and years, it's always one of the biggest obstacles people have, is that they simply just don't have the time to be doing movement screens every session. Well, the good news is you don't need to do a movement screen every single session. We need to do one on initial startup with a client or a patient to figure out where they're at to get our baseline, and to figure out, do they have anything that we need to be aware of, most importantly, pain, or do they have any significant dysfunctions, meaning we have a 1 here that we need to address. Once we've gone through that, we don't need to retest everything every time. What we're going to do is figure out, what do we need to protect? Do we have any painful or dysfunctional patterns? What do we need to correct, if anything? Do we have any patterns that scored a 1? And if so, we're going to then diagnose what is our most dysfunctional, non-painful pattern. And we do that using a very specific hierarchy or algorithm that we teach in our level 1 course, where if we were to have multiple patterns that all scored a 1, we need to figure out which one are we going to start with first and focus on, because we're going to protect all of them and stay away from red light exercises, which we call them, which are the exercises that are contraindicated for that specific pattern, to try to correct one pattern. What's going to happen is the next time that client comes in the door, all I'm going to do is just test that pattern. Now, when I retest that pattern, one of 3 things is going to happen. 1, the ideal happens is that they become a 2 or a 3 in that pattern. Now it's up to where we want it to be. Now I'm going to retest everything. And sometimes by fixing some of these lower level patterns, and that's why we have the hierarchy, we can fix some of the patterns above it. So by addressing one pattern specifically, we may correct 3 or 4 others. The second thing that can happen is that the pattern is improved, but it hasn't moved the needle in terms of their FMS score, meaning that someone's shoulder mobility, and they have, say, a 20 centimeter hand or an 8-inch hand, they started off 40 centimeters, or they started off 20 inches apart, which would be a 1. But now they've improved to where they're maybe 32 centimeters apart, or they're 13 inches apart. That's a pretty significant improvement. And it tells me as well as the client that this is working. Let's stick with this. We just haven't hit the mark we want to hit. So let's continue on the path and let's recheck that next time. The last thing that will happen is that sometimes it won't work. And if it doesn't work, it's usually because of one of three reasons. One is there was no compliance. They didn't actually do the program. Well, that's easy to fix. Get them on track doing their program. Two is that they've been doing their program diligently, but they've been doing it wrong. The first thing I'll do if someone didn't get any progress is say, do me a favor and show me the corrective exercises that you've been doing. And what they'll show me is not the same thing that I taught them. So all we need to do then is clean up their technique and form, and usually we get progress pretty quickly. So corrective exercise done incorrectly doesn't correct anything. The last reason is you probably missed something, meaning that maybe you scored it improperly. You let them get a 3 in their active straight leg raise. Meanwhile, you weren't watching the other leg and they should have really got a 1. Or you were working on the wrong pattern. You were working on hurdle step, let's say, when you should have been working on active straight leg raise. Or, and this happens very, very rarely, is that you miss something along the way that was maybe in their medical history or in their exercise history that we needed to address that is not going to be suitable to get addressed through the movement screen. Other than that, once we get them to all 2s, now it's a matter of just making sure that we keep those 2s and we don't lose them. So I always say that the movement screen acts as an auditing system for your programs. So if I've got you in a training program now, my main job to check your scores is to make sure that we're not making you worse and those scores don't back off. How often we need to do that? Well, that depends on your populations. Athletes may need a little bit more, especially during more intensive competitive times, whereas your general population may need a little bit less, usually about once a quarter. And with the general population, there's usually natural breaks where they're going on vacation or a trip that we can come back and recheck and see if that trip or that layoff has made an effect on them. And where do we now jumpstart our next sequence of our training and our next cycle of training? In between, there are some things that I do want to check on a more regular basis. One of the things I will implement, even though I'm not a clinician, is the top tier movements of the SFMA. You do need to be a clinician to get certified in the selective functional movement assessment, but you don't need to be a clinician to understand those top tier movements. Those only take about 60 seconds to do. And that gives me a quick snapshot of where they're at currently today, because maybe they shoveled snow or played 36 holes of golf or did a real tough run between the last time I screened them and today. And I want to get a quick glimpse of that before I go and put them in their program for that day, because I may need to make some alterations. Other things that we'll implement on a little more frequent basis is a quick breathing screen, which we teach in our breathing course, as well as our motor control screen. Those are a little bit more sensitive, and we may see changes in those prior to seeing a movement change, I should say a score in their movement screen change. And so it's a little bit more sensitive. So we can see positive and or negative changes in the breathing and motor control screens that we can start to detect that something is off or something is going in the right direction, and then adjust our program accordingly. So hopefully that answers some of the questions in terms of rescreening once you've done your initial screen, and how do I stay on top of making sure they're still moving well while I'm getting them to move often and train. Thank you for listening. Once again, my name is Eric DeGatti from Functional Movement Systems, and grateful to be part of the Strength Coach podcast. Thanks for listening.
All right, now it's time for the Results Fitness University Business of Fitness segment. I'm here with Elias Scarr, the Membership Director at Results Fitness, as well as the Sales and Communication Coach for Results Fitness University. Elias, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, man, let's get it.
All right, so we went over the strategy session last week, and what I want to talk to you about is going a little deeper. I absolutely love that you guys fill out the PAR-Q with them. And I think my option, when I had 5-Iron Fitness, I made a survey, almost like a Survey Monkey, but it wasn't, where I had them do it at home. because I wanted to make sure that they sat there. Because so many times when you hand them, fill this out, that, they don't remember all the crap. And then they just kind of breeze through it. Like they forget about an ankle injury that they had. But when you go through it with them, so for what I did was I did the survey, and then I took that information, I made some notes, but then I kind of went over it again. Even I'm like, okay, so no ankle injuries, right? No hip, no knee, whatever. And then I was building rapport with the information that I got. But I actually really like the way you guys do it. You're filling out that PAR queue with them. Talk to me about the importance of that, and maybe some of the deeper questions that you're going to ask besides, history of, their great grandfather's, heart history.
Yeah. So there's a lot that goes into this in filling this out with them and filling that out with another person. When someone comes into the dentist office, right, or the doctor's office, which no one likes to go to, they get told, fill this out and come back when you're done, right? And I don't want to be anything like that. I don't want it to feel. We have to keep in mind, people buy based on how they feel. And we want to make sure that we take any moment, any interaction that we do, and we concentrate on, how does this feel? How does having them fill it out versus me going through and doing an interview, how does that feel? And so by doing an interview, we get to accomplish a whole lot of things. Number one, straight up from a system point of view, any staff member at the gym can do this. That's the other important part, is that it's replicable. Any staff member can sit down and literally just go through the questions with that person, and it will lead them to an easy sale. So this is a replicable system. But importantly, when we talk about filling this out and asking these questions, it just allows you to start a conversation, to get to know somebody, to ask them questions. First, like medical questions, digging deep. If you find out, like for me, for example, if I find out somebody has back issues, I can commiserate. I can say, yeah, that's tough. I've been through back surgery myself. I can understand how difficult that is. And when we start to get into these questions and we listen to these answers and we find common ground, people start to really feel like you understand them. And that's the first step in building rapport, is they have to feel like you understand them, because people will buy from people they like. And we like people who understand us. And so that's the baseline of how we want to get started with this.
Absolutely. And then there's really another great reason why you want to do this. And you and I were talking about this in the Strength Coach TV episode, is a lot of people will take somebody on a tour. The first thing they do, like, okay, hey, Joe, how you doing? Nice to meet you. Let's take a little bit of a walk, and we'll go around and show you. And you think you're going to build rapport and let them feel a little comfortable. But you guys, you actually do the tour last. And
yes,
and I like that, because now you don't have to go over every single, you'll pick stops, right? And say, based on that conversation that you had, because if somebody's not trying to lift 500 pounds off the ground, you don't need to show them always like, oh, look how much weight we have. And we have this whole powerlifting area here. We have, and this is Craig, our powerlifting coach, so it's a great way, right? To like, tell us about this idea about doing the tour last.
Yeah. So you actually hit the major points. The biggest thing about doing the tour last is you can't compete over toys, because you'll lose to a big box. If you're a small gym or a private gym or a gym that doesn't use a ton of equipment, just having less stuff can sometimes give somebody an impression of, oh, why don't you have all these other things I've seen? And we're just guessing if we'd give the tour first. Here's some treadmills. Here's a TRX. Here's this. Here's that. Everybody has that. That doesn't set you apart. But if we do all of this information gathering ahead of time, I can sit with somebody and say, okay, so here's a TRX. And this is one of my favorite tools in the game. So I'm going to give you a chance to do one of these exercises with me. And I'll set them up for an assisted squat, right? A TRX squat. And I'm working with somebody who's 65. She wants to garden again, but she's got difficult time getting up and down off the ground. And I know that because that's what she wants to do. She wants to be mobile and functional. She doesn't want her kids to have to support her. And she wants to do the things that she likes to do. And then for the first time in however many years, with the assistance of a TRX, we can put her through a full range squat that she hasn't felt in a long time. And I would not be able to know how powerful that would feel for her if we hadn't done all this information gathering ahead of time. So it almost starts to feel like these little miracles happen. I can go into our group training room where our classes take place, our large group is, And I can talk to somebody who was a football player. And I said, hey, you remember playing football, right? And you're a running back and you'd score a touchdown. Are you the only one that celebrates? And they're like, no. And I'm like, absolutely right. The whole team celebrates. Everybody goes nuts. Well, that's what this group room is like. When you win and you hit a PR or you drop weight or you put on muscle, your heart rate's better, then everyone celebrates. And so we start to link these things in the gym to things in their life that are important to them, or things that they love, or memories or relationships that they love, that they enjoy. And we can't do that if we do the tour first. It's a lost opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing, just want to get your thoughts on. So, because like the only thing with the like showing toys sometimes is when I did the tour at 5-iron, what I would show is some of the my unique selling points. So for example, I would take them over to the True Stretch cage, which a lot of gyms don't have because it takes up room and it's, it's $2,500 or so. But I worked with golfers. So I would get in a golf position in the True Stretch and say, try this out. Look at this position. And they would love it. And by the way, every single one of my golfers use that True Stretch cage. And then I would show them the concrete wall. It sounds funny, but a concrete wall is important because med balls are such a big part of our program that we would throw some med balls. And I would always say, like, you're not going to be able to do this over at, New York Sports, and your wife or your husband certainly isn't going to throw it in the house, So these were unique selling points. And I had a putting green and I would take them on the putting green. The putting green was actually elevated on purpose because the guy who put it in said, you want that because when they come from the bottom, and walk onto this green, it's kind of like they have this feeling of they're on a different surface and it's a little higher and it's a good feeling, And so for me, that was another wow factor. Not every one of my clients used that putting green, but they all said, oh, wow, this is really cool. Oh, yeah, I can do my putting here. Great, this is cool. So with that, those toys, I think when they're unique, you can feature them.
I agree. We're actually digging into some real deep psychological stuff here. So you, at that place with the equipment that you have, were super dialed into your demographic, a really, really specific demographic, which, by the way, is exactly what you need in order to sell well. But having a demographic that's so specific, those unique selling points start to become an era of, like, if we talk about the golfer, just the golfer in general, that golf is considered sort of an elevated sport. It is a high skill sport. It is an expensive sport. So there's sort of a feeling of stepping onto that golf course. So I agree, stepping up onto a higher level putting green, getting into these things that you have that no one else has, taps into that. Simply having a membership at a golf course is something that most people don't have. So showing them things in your gym that most gyms don't have is absolutely going to resonate with them. So you are set up for success simply by having the right demographic completely nailed down. So in giving your tour and showing these unique things, that's a home run.
Yeah, but you still would have gave me probably like maybe a B- because I probably did the tour. I probably did the tour first, and then I didn't fill it out in person. Although I felt like the process worked because I would spend 10-15 minutes talking to them about their life. But how long does this all take?
The whole thing takes about 45 minutes. And a lot of times we think, okay, oh my gosh, having this conversation and asking all these questions and talking so much. If you talk too much, it's going to take a long time. It's going to take an hour and a half. But the more you have them talking and the more you get them to sort of lead the conversation with your engineering, then it should only take 45 minutes to an hour. I like to slot an hour because some people are more talkative than others, but all of them should be able to get done within an hour.
Very cool. All right, Elias, thank you so much for doing this. And we will talk to you next time.
All right, sounds good.
All right, everybody, check out resultsfitnessuniversity.com for information on their masterminds and their coaching.
Hey, this is Adam.
This is Tim.
Welcome to the Train Hook Data-Driven Coaching segment.
Let's do it.
So today, let's just go one level deeper from where we were last time when we talked about RPE and varying training stress. And let's get into a little bit about load management.
Love that. Hot topic right now.
Yeah, if you read around on the internet, you'll see lots of fans. NBA season's in swing, 4 games in, Kawhi Leonard sitting out.
Kawhi's soft, Adam. He is soft. I'm just kidding.
From a fan's point of view, it makes sense because if you show up to the game, you want to see the star player.
Totally anticipate that. Yeah.
But, load management, I think, isn't really understood very well. And the idea is like, it's not supposed to be letting the guy get hurt or injured or his play deteriorating and then like, oh, maybe he needs to rest. Like maybe we can't play him for now.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be like, hey, let's maybe keep him from getting to that point.
Exactly. And kind of stepping away from like a world-renowned superstar and taking this into more of like a real-world scenario. In my experience, I had this young man, his name was Kyle. He played left tackle for our football team, American football. And Kyle's a fantastic player, 3-time first-team all-conference, but we called him Robo-Tackle or Robocop because he was taped from his big toe all the way up to his neck, everywhere in between. So we had to be very prescriptive with Kyle's training in the weight room, with his practice reps, because obviously that has a huge impact on his health. So we were trying to be proactive at the beginning of the season. It didn't take Kyle with his third injury of that year for us to take a step off the accelerator. We actually had an action plan before this thing happened. He wasn't the only one on the team like that, but we're trying to be proactive, not reactive. And here's the thing, Adam. A lot of kids would like look at Adam or at Kyle and be like, man, he's not training. Why am I training? Well, fair isn't equal. We need Kyle when the stuff hits the fan on Saturdays. We don't necessarily need him every single rep in practice. You know what I mean? So fair isn't equal. That's an old, coaching saying, but I love that when it comes to load management.
Never mind that. You're talking about a guy who's already kind of earned his stripes already. Like
totally.
he's already
30+ starter.
And so like he's already improved to the point where he's a valuable part of the team. If he could, the other thing is, if he could train, he would be.
Totally.
Right? It's not like he doesn't want to, you don't want him to.
You got it.
It's a matter of like what's best for the team at that point.
That's exactly right.
Right. And so, let's take a step back, the fair not equal thing.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a thought experiment here real quick.
Cool.
Which is, let's take Kawhi. You get real Kawhi. Well, he's a monster, $33 million a year.
Yeah, Terminator. Yeah.
But he's got this knee problem that apparently is some kind of chronic thing that it just isn't going to go away.
Sure.
And it can flare back up. And we've all seen him limp around the court when it's hurting him.
Yeah.
And so let's take like a parallel universe version of Kawhi, who's exactly the same in every way, except that he doesn't have this knee problem. Do you train those guys exactly the same? Do you manage their training stresses the same? Can they handle the same amount?
Working backwards is obviously they can't handle the same amount, right? I'm taking genetically engineered Kawhi and pushing him a little bit, right? Because I understand his thresholds a little bit better. But I think this is like coaching 101, Adam. This is what we do on a daily basis, right? Change, adapt, evolve. I mean, no. The answer is no. I don't treat them the same, right? And I think that's an important message here. You know what I mean? I guess it's hard for me to like work around, but it's...
Yeah, I mean, it's just that like not everybody has the same conditions. And that's what we're acknowledging.
Exactly
here.
right.
So the idea of load management is not new. It's the term might be, and we're better at putting numbers now. So like going back to RPE, you can take RPE times time. You can get a session RPE. You can calculate training loads and strains and monotony and all that jazz from that, right?
Yeah.
You can, and then you can do it a little more sophisticated with GPS and heart rate and velocity and all these data points that we can collect. But that idea, like every day you program for somebody, you're doing load management to some extent. Like it's a little bit different, but you're not giving them like the smallest stimulus possible because that wouldn't get them as good as it could be. Mm-hmm. You're also not giving them as much as possible because it's virtually unchecked. So like you could just bury somebody if you want to.
Totally.
There's this like implicit understanding that over a given time frame, right? Yes. Like a day, a week, a month, right? Sure. Longer term is a little harder to visualize, right? Because like we're in November now, and you're talking about the NBA playoffs being in the summer sometime, right? But over the day, I can only handle a certain amount and recover and get better from that, and come back and train again tomorrow. Mm-hmm. In a week, we can also kind of picture that cycle. A month, we can picture some weeks stacked up. Totally. Now the months have to add up to something that makes sense, right? Absolutely. And this is where all your cycling of like your training loads and deloads and all this stuff comes in.
Sure.
So that idea is not old. I think it's just that we're better at putting numbers to it, and it's more like visible. Like football. You get an example of football.
Yeah, football. I mean, it's an abbreviated season, right? There's 16 games. Those games are much more important than a season where there's 100 games. You know what I mean? So those guys have to be ready to go more often because each competition means more.
And the load management there probably happens more between games, right? Like older players or beat up players just don't practice as hard.
You got it.
Right?
That's right.
To a large extent. That's going to do it for us today. Go to trainhook.com to start your 14-day free trial. When you're talking to one of our representatives, tell them the Strength Coach podcast sent you for 10% off a year of the Pro or Elite Edition.
All right, now it's time for the Body by Boyle online.com. Hit the gym with the Strength Coach segment. Become an insider to Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning with staff meetings, in-services, and complete access to the MBSC programs at bodybyboyleonline.com. All right, today I have Caleb Heilman on, and he is the owner of Heilman's Performance in Minot, North Dakota. I can't believe I got that right. But what's really cool is he's also the Minot State Athletic Strength and Conditioning. He's the lead for all of those programs. And he went to Minot State. He played baseball there. He graduated and kind of stuck around to be a coach, kind of assistant coach with them. And then pretty cool, kind of right place, right time. Before you know it, he's working with the baseball strength and conditioning, and now he's the head guy there for strength and conditioning. So, and he still has his facility, so which he's had since 2014. So I want to talk about that. Caleb, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I just reached out to you roughly a month ago, and the things you guys are doing and pushing the strength and conditioning industry forward has been huge for me up here in Central North Dakota. There's not a lot of us. So I think mentorship is something that I kind of lacked early in my profession. So to have a medium such as this podcast and all the professionals that you've had on, I appreciate everything you're doing. So thank you.
All right. Very cool. Yeah. One of the reasons that kind of I wanted to get you on was just, you're really still, you're a young guy. Your career is starting to take off. And I kind of like your story because, you were a player and then you stuck around at school, and then you opened your own place, and then, right place, right time. Here you are now. You got both gigs going. Just give us, I don't normally do this with the background, but I want to go over this because I want young coaches to see how this can happen. So talk to us about, you graduate from Minot State, you played baseball, go from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So out of baseball, out of my competitive collegiate career, I knew probably by the time I was a sophomore that baseball after college wasn't going to be a realistic expectation. So when I got to college, I got introduced to strength and conditioning and fell in love. And I knew pretty early that I wanted to work with athletes. So I actually worked a couple years just in private human performance after college. After a couple of years of working really hard, I decided that it was time to go on my own. And I opened Heilman's Performance in May of 2014. We were just in a 2,400 square foot garage. We bought a bunch of horse trailer mats, some free weights, threw them down. I actually always tell the story. I think it's funny. I didn't have any money when I first started. If I had any business savvy whatsoever, I probably wouldn't have ever started. I went and borrowed some money from some private lenders, took those to multiple banks, got kicked out of a lot of different loan officers' offices until I found one that had actually financed a CrossFit gym in a smaller town here in North Dakota, and had seen that grow and seen the potential and said, I love your ideas. Let's go. Let's do it. Gave us some financing, and we laid the horse trailer mats down, the free weights, pretty much barbells, dumbbells, squat racks, medicine balls. And I actually went and bought like pontoon carpet for a turf strip because we couldn't afford turf.
Okay, wait, hold on. New Yorker here. All right. Yeah, I know what horse trailer mats are. I was already laughing about that. But,
yeah.
But what is a pontoon carpet?
Okay, so pontoon is it's like a large flatbed boat.
Yeah.
It sits on pontoons that allow it to stay afloat, like a deck boat. So it was basically boat carpet that we had just glued to the cement. Again, we had a 60 by 40 facility. I was relatively well versed in the functional movement screen and functional movement systems. So I was individualizing programs for all the athletes that had rolled in as best as I knew how at the time. And we just went. We bounced hip hop music off the walls and trained youth athletes in the area. And now we're, almost 6 years into it, and we're in an 8,600 square foot facility now. We have a little sport court in-house that we offer basketball skills training. We have an in-house hitting coach, 2 full batting cages. Our weight room has expanded into, now we have roughly 4,000 square feet available for that. We have real turf now, kettlebells, dumbbells. We have a couple woodway treadmills, still doing the individualized programming. And then we're, we handle the contract at the local university, which we started January 1. And then we're also in charge of all of the strength and conditioning services for the public school system. So we signed that contract June 1st. So we're in the high school weight room, we're in the college weight room, and also running our own little private operation on the side. So a lot going on.
Yeah.
But it's been good. It's been exciting.
Talk to me about the contracts, how that works with Minot State, because aren't you you're already working there though, right? As well. Yeah. So how is that? Yeah, is that different or is it the same?
Yeah. So we contracted it through the company, and I'm sure I know I left a little bit of money on the table in doing so, with some of the benefits packages and those things that are offered as a full-time employer through the state. It was important to me that I kept my freedom. It was important to me that we could kind of design things up there the way we saw fit, and still be able to keep some influence down here at the private location. So I was employed. I was being paid as an employee, as a part-time employee, to train just the baseball team.
Yeah.
Once the baseball team started having some success, like I said, they had won the conference outright, the regular season conference title outright, with the eventual national champion in the conference. We're up here in the NSIC conference, it's not a cupcake conference by any means. And then last year, advanced to the conference championship, just kind of ran out of gas, ran out of pitching towards the end of the conference. But because they had so much success, when the head strength and conditioning coach resigned here, my company was just kind of right place, right time. They were looking for somebody in the middle of the year. I stepped in with our athletic director, Andy Carter, and said, I would like to try and take on the challenge. I think we have the system in place and we have the staff in place to do it. So we had just contracted it for a flat rate, and we're in charge of providing strength and conditioning services to the university. We work out of their weight room, but we're in charge of our own schedule. We're in charge of getting in touch with all the head coaches and making sure they get what they need, and working alongside them, and being a familiar face, but also an entrepreneur, has kind of helped me segue into that position and made the transition pretty easy. So
yeah, I love it though, because obviously they had a strength and conditioning coach, so they were paying a strength and conditioning coach, and now instead of that strength and conditioning coach, it's just contracted to a private company, which is your company. But obviously they went in a different route as well. Okay, interesting. Haven't heard of that before, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's definitely unique, and I know our athletic director has talked about it with a number of other athletic directors in the conference, and what it's allowed us to do is keep our sanity. I think obviously everybody understands how prevalent burnout is in strength and conditioning. It was important to me that we were able to kind of set our own schedule and try and implement things that we thought were important, not only to give the athletes what they needed, but also preserve our mental health. My wife and I just gave birth to our daughter, or she gave birth to our daughter 7 months ago. So having a newborn at home, there's a lot more going on. It was just important to me that we could do things well, but still have some control up there. I think a lot of times strength and conditioning coaches fall victim a lot of times to the agendas of head coaches across the university, and a lot of times that's why the burnout rate is so high. So
Love it. Yeah, you're right. You're right. And it's you've kind of taken control of that. And I think that's I love it because that's part of the reason why I like this story is because I think it offers people hope, from like your perspective of being a player into kind of coaching and then opening your own facility and then seeing that you can also take that. There are other ways around that to work with those university student athletes, as well as the public school system that you have now, which obviously that was a product of, hey, well, we're at the university. Can we handle the public school system? We might as well, right? I mean, same idea.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it just speaks volumes to, I think what we've probably done best is just kind of done what we could with what we have, where we are, and remained kind of process driven. And what that allowed us to do was develop a system and get really good at the system. So remaining patient. And then when these opportunities kind of opened up, we were ready. I mean, it wasn't a scramble to get ready. We had already had this system in place. And we had taken advantage of some of the internship and practicum hours that the university requires their students to do. So just about all of my staff members in some capacity did a practicum with me. So we were able to educate them and kind of use that as almost like a feeder program to the hiring process. And I mean, really, when these opportunities presented themselves, they all kind of came at once. So it was a bit stressful, but I knew we were ready and we had the right people in place, and, just communication with my staff members and making sure it was what they wanted. And they've done a fantastic job of handling everything that's come on now. We're stretched a little bit thin now, but again, they were just opportunities that you'd be silly to not take advantage of. So
yeah, I think there's an opportunity here as well, and obviously it's new, but in 3, 4, 5 years, your staff, like it's going to be an opportunity for local kids, local students, local athletes to kind of go in that direction and know, okay, cool, they're expanding over there, they're working with the public school, they're working with the college. And you could start to feed some of your former athletes into, and they are going to end up being your employees. I know in 5 years, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's funny you say that because I actually already have one of my former athletes that trained with us since he was probably in here when he was 13, 14 years old, I guess. I mean, when we first opened, I have a picture on my Instagram actually of him on the first day we opened. Now he's helping with our basketball skills programs. So these young people that get in and they almost become a part of the family. And we try and push that, obviously with the young kids, it's about educating them and making sure they're enjoying it and making sure they're making progress. And then they fall in love with it and they stick around and they see the vision and they want to be a part of it. So that's already happening, which is really cool to see. And then another kind of unintended benefit of it is we have a few athletes now that have signed with us at Minot State University, who again have been training with us since they were 12. Mm-hmm. So when they become freshmen at the university, they'll step in and read the programming and they'll already know how to navigate the weight room, how to put our programs to work better than a lot of the juniors and seniors just because they've worked with us for so long. So,
yeah. And those kids will become leaders for the team as well to kind of help them in the gym as well. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Love it. And also, there's another benefit here from marketing because you're in the public school system. A lot of times I get kids even now that they're on the hockey team or on the softball team, but they go to a private facility, obviously, to train. Mm-hmm. And then you're going to have that added benefit of, hey, where are we going to train? Of course, we're going to Heilman's. He's our guy at the high school. We're going to go in there in the off season too and start to train. So that's a really huge marketing piece. And I think that this is something that a lot of small towns without strength coaches, if you have a facility in a small town and the public school system doesn't have a strength coach, this is something that you should look into.
No doubt. We've had a lot of that now too, that we're in the high school. A lot of people understand that, our programs are being put into practice up there. So what we're getting now is a lot of people reaching out to us. We have a very small group environment down here at the private sector, and it costs a little bit more than, obviously if they send their kids to the high school weight room, it's free. But we have a lot of parents that want their kids to learn how to navigate the weight room prior to going up to the high school, where they might be training with, 50 to 70 kids at the same time. We're down here, they'll have access to a coach with only 6 or 7 other kids in the weight room. So we have a lot of people that are seeing value in getting their kids in here early, learning how to navigate the weight room, learning how to move properly, learning how to lift, learning how to communicate with coaches, and, all the things that come with being in a busy weight room prior to heading up to the high school. So,
yeah.
And I think there's crazy benefit in that. I mean, the kids that work with us down here and work up at the high school always tend to be our best lifters. So,
yeah, of course. Now, normally, we would see a lot of differences between private sector, strength and conditioning, high school, collegiate, but they're going to the same guy. But what have you noticed that are different? Yeah. What are some differences that, with programming that you've noticed or you've had to kind of navigate because you're at the schools that you might do differently in the private sector? What have you noticed?
Yeah, I think more than anything, it's more logistics and classroom management and equipment availability and those kinds of things. Like we talked about earlier, as far as the sport specificity, essentially what we do is we have a frontal and transverse plane athlete template for off-season athletes, in-season athletes. We kind of adjust those accordingly depending on what we know what we're going to get with team sizes and equipment availability and those kinds of things. And then we have what we call a sagittal plane template. So some of the sports that spend a little bit less time in those rotational planes, and they're just very, very small differences. Simple things. At the high school, we utilize a lot more trisets and supersets and those kinds of things, trying to find ways to keep kids busy in the event that it gets real busy and they're waiting for equipment. In the private sector, I would say you can probably dig into the things that align with the science of exercise a little bit more often, because you're not so concerned with the classroom management perspective, where, I think when I took the job as director of human performance up at the university, you come in thinking like, I've prepared forever for this, all those early mornings, getting up, reading and studying and listening to the podcast and all those things. Then you realize pretty quickly a lot of it really is just holding people accountable to a specific standard and making sure they stay consistent and making sure they train hard. And then it's a lot of classroom management, trying to make sure everybody can get in and get access to the facility. Up at the university, we have 13 teams with 350 athletes, and we have 7 platforms and 7 squat racks, 1 rack of dumbbells, 1 set of kettlebells. So the logistics of it are a real challenge. It's myself as the full-time director of human performance, and then I have 1 graduate assistant. So between the 2 of us, we got to figure out how we get 350 people through there. So obviously those logistical challenges make things so much different than scheduling and programming in the private sector.
Yeah, you got to make sure one of your former athletes in the private sector is in at least one of the, separate them in the groups at the college, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And they've been incredibly helpful. I think that's the benefit too, like we talked about, of being able to, not only do you have to have a system to educate people on it, But then the ability to educate them on the system is invaluable, because that's essentially what you'll have then, is these people will start to educate their peers. You know, when you have 40, 50 football players in the weight room at once, you need that. You need some guys that know what's going on and know how to help their teammates out and help get them through things. Because again, the limitations, and I'd imagine at most Division II universities, NAIA universities, those kinds of things, I'd imagine a lot of them battle these challenges. So
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about you. When I asked you about some things, other things that we would talk about, and you were talking about a little bit of the prevalence of overtraining in college sports, or really what you've seen. Talk to me about that, because I think we've even seen a little bit. Actually, the opposite is like it's hard to. It's not so much the training as much as they don't sleep, they don't eat right. What are you noticing with this idea of what you're feeling like is a little bit of overtraining?
Yeah. So I've always said in college sports, I think we tend to train athletes as if they're all like on the TB12 method, you know, like they're all drinking 300 ounces of water, and they're all sleeping 10 hours a night, and they're all eating, you know, their 40 grams of protein a day, or whatever the case may be. And really, that's going to be like 1% of the people we work with in the college sector. Yeah. So for me, I've always said, I just think it would be easier if we adjusted our methods, rather than, you know, trying to get 350 people to kind of bring themselves up to these expectations. And I know we want to keep the standard high and raise the standard, but a lot of it is really just education. I mean, it's not that a lot of these kids don't want to be better, and they don't want to hold themselves to that standard. A lot of them just don't know how yet. So we see that a lot with, you know, obviously freshmen, sophomores. If they're not sleeping, if they're not eating right, then you mix in how prevalent binge drinking is at the college level. A lot of these guys are dealing with things from the neck up that we don't even really know about. And then you've got, you know, head coaches and strength coaches and pushing their agendas on them. And I think it's incredible how many athletes we have that are essentially training and competing in a fatigue state all the time. I think of, you know, a couple of the athletes that we had on the baseball team in the past that were going through nursing. They were nursing majors, and the nursing program at Minot State is pretty competitive, and it's kind of widely understood that it's one of the more challenging programs on campus. And one of the individuals was actually, I think, the first person we've ever had on the MLB draft board. He ended up not getting drafted. But just to see his name up there was pretty cool. And it kind of got me thinking, like, God, you know, this kid was so talented, and he was such a good dude, and he handled his business. He showed up on time. He worked hard. He never missed anything. And he was one of those guys. You know, he would be at nursing practicum, nursing clinical hours until 1 o'clock in the morning. And he was at 6 a.m. weights every morning, like Groundhog's Day. So I always think about some of these guys that, you know, competed and trained in such a fatigue state for essentially 4.5, 5 years. How much low hanging fruit there is, you know, to maybe adjust a little bit and make sure they're not training in a fatigue state or competing in a fatigue state so often.
Yeah. So what are some other things that you've tried to do now that you've noticed that? What are some things that you're trying to implement as, okay, this is your responsibility now? So talk to us about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. We've tried to put our money where our mouth is a little bit. At Minot State, our athletes, when they're in season, don't train as a team. So I think that took a little bit of selling to some of the head coaches. But what we've allowed them to do is we put out a sign-up sheet at the beginning of the semester for the in-season athletes, and they come in and train within their class schedule.
Nice. I like that.
Yeah. So just a perfect example of that, our starting quarterback this this past season didn't have classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. His schedule just worked out that all of the load he took was on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So the starting quarterback of our football team got to sleep in and wake up and eat breakfast and come to weights, get his training session in, and then go about his day, go to meetings. And so we've seen, a lot of people be relatively skeptical early on, whether or not it's going to affect the ability to build culture and build team bonding and those kinds of things. But I think what we've seen now is a lot of times you'll have 2 or 3 cross-country runners in there training together. You'll have 2 or 3 golfers in there training together, some hockey players, some basketball players, some football players. And we're kind of seeing this almost like mutual respect amongst athletes and between the teams start to grow as a result of these people training together that aren't necessarily teammates. So it's been really cool. They're all still held accountable to their time and to their days, and we hold them accountable to communicating with us. If they can't make a certain time or if they need a schedule change. But I think that autonomy aligns itself a little bit better with the science of exercise and allows them to train less often in a fatigue state. And I think it's really helped us build trust and rapport with some of the athletes, because I think they see that we're actually trying to change some of these traditional methods to help them out. And a lot of them I know appreciate it. So
yeah. Now let's talk about some of the traditional things we've seen, and that is a lot of sports specificity. Talk to us about how you're dealing with that and how you're working towards this idea about everything needs to be specific.
Yeah. And it's so funny because I've worked so hard at being a generalist, and I thought it would pay so much dividends, and it has. But then when you get into the collegiate ranks, it's like, you try and put all of this information that you've worked so hard to gather for so long to work for you, and then you have people saying, well, he never played this sport, so he doesn't understand what we need, and he doesn't understand how to train this style of athlete. But I would say that's probably the biggest misunderstanding. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. We kind of follow actually the reason I reached out to you was because I had listened to the Drew Massey episode, and you guys were talking about, what was it? Sprint, jump, throw. Mm-hmm. And we've always kind of done that with all of our athletes. So no matter what sport you play, you start by doing some type of implement training. We always called it plyometrics and speed. And then we follow the squat, hinge, push, pull, carry protocols. And then it's just kind of trying to figure out, what volume and intensity matches each team and individual as far as where they're at in their competitive season and those kinds of things. But as far as the movements, I mean, that a squat is a squat, a lunge is a lunge, a push is a push, a pull is a pull. We've tried to pick exercises that help kind of alleviate some of those traditional opinions. But for the most part, we've got most of our athletes doing a lot of the same things. And then we expect them, obviously, to take those physical qualities to their competitive endeavor and express those physical qualities on their own.
Yeah. Have you had any problem with coaches at all? I mean, obviously, because you were a coach and you were a player there, you obviously must know everybody. You knew everybody already. So have you had a little easier time convincing them that what you're doing was the right path?
We haven't really had any issues as far as the coaches expressing their opinions. I think they understand it a little bit more. They're always just more concerned about, like I said, the volumes and the intensities. Obviously, nobody wants their athletes to come to the strength coach and get crushed in the midweek when they have, a slate of games on the weekends. But as far as specific movements, I think there's been discussions had, but they've been fantastic as far as kind of allowing us to do our thing and it's pretty well understood from the top down, you know, that, hey, if everyone's doing their job, if everyone's staying busy, you don't have time. I mean, I don't have time to go talk to the college football coach about, you know, why we're running this offense or why we're implementing, you know, cover 2 against this team this weekend. I don't have time for it. And I don't care, really. It's none of my business. So I think that helps is me, you know, I'm not going to try and pretend that I know the ins and outs and the X's and O's of all of these sports. And then I think that kind of helps them, you know, allow me to do my job. And so long as everyone is improving, I think everyone has a general understanding that this is now a profession in its own right. And without some of the formal education and without putting some type of extra effort into improving, just not anybody can do it anymore. So
yeah, absolutely. I want to finish up with kind of this last story that you have about your time you spent with the Toronto Blue Jays in terms of helping them out a little bit, because, you know, Coach Boyle a long time ago wrote an article about 25 things he wishes he did, and that one of them at the time was visit more facilities, more coaches, and that actually sparked me to start Strength Coach TV, because I said, you know, it's hard for people to go to places sometimes. So what I wanted to do was bring that place to other people. And in my book, we have like 3 3 challenges or you know, action steps for people to go either visit people they haven't seen in a while, or mentors, or go to other facilities. And I love this story of like your experience, and I just want to tell everybody what you did and then how it's helped you and how important that's been in kind of your development.
Yeah. It was vital. So my college roommate, Scott Peters, who is now, he actually just got promoted. I know with Nikki Huffman leaving the organization. Anyways, was one of the most driven individuals I'd ever met in my life. Ended up going to Duke for physical therapy school, worked his way in to the Toronto Blue Jays organization as an assistant physical therapist. Actually think he did a short internship with the Red Sox. I don't know if that was before he went to Duke or after, but anyways, he had contacted me and he knew that I was implementing the functional movement screen with my athletes, and I was pretty well versed in gathering the data, and they wanted to kind of implement it with the Toronto Blue Jays. So he had just called me and said, hey, we need some help with screening and spring training. You know, there's a lot of guys coming in, and not everybody here is 100% well versed in collecting the data. So they flew me out, and I stayed for spring training and essentially just helped them collect data and helped them input it into the system. And I did that for 3 spring trainings in a row. Each year it became a little bit more evident that they were starting to get their system in place and they didn't need my help quite as much as they had the first year. But regardless, I mean, I tell everybody what it did for me more than anything was make me more confident. You know, when you get down there and you see what some of these high performance organizations are doing, you start to realize that they work together, they communicate really well, they treat each other with respect, and they just do the simple stuff really well. And once I realized that, you know, I felt like I belonged. I felt like I fit. And it just made me more confident, you know, knowing that we were doing the right things and we were on the right path. And you don't really get as starstruck, you know, as I thought I was going to be coming down and being amongst all of these professionals in a professional organization. So just being able to get out of Minot and go see those things, you realize that, you know, especially in today's age, if you want access to information and if you want to be good, and you're gonna work hard to go get it, once you see those people that are good, you realize man, they're just doing a lot of the same stuff we're doing. They just do it really well.
Yeah. And it's the important part. I know it was, you were lucky because your friend was doing that, but at the same time, people need to know, look, hey, reach out to different teams, volunteer, tell them you help them out, offer your services, because the experience, like it was for you, is invaluable. So good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Caleb, thank you so much for coming on. I'm glad you reached out to me. I just kind of looked into your story a little bit, and I love this whole idea of being a player and a coach, and then opening your own facility, and then ending up, really staying with the university and the public school system. And I think it provides a spark for other young strength coaches out there. I hope some people start to realize that, hey, maybe, go to your public school system, go to a local university. If they don't have a strength coach full-time for some of the teams, maybe it's something that you can do. So I think that's your next step. Your next step is going to be coaching strength coaches on how to get into the public school system. So Caleb, thanks for doing this.
Yes, thank you. And again, thank you for all you do. I've always been a listener, and I'll continue to be a listener. So important to people like me that are stuck up here in central North Dakota, and there's not a ton of conferences and continuing ed going on. So what you're doing is incredible for people like me and young strength coaches everywhere. So thank you.
All right, that's going to do it for episode 268 of the Strength Coach Podcast. Remember, you can try strengthcoach.com out 3 days, just $1. You'll have access to all the articles, videos, and programs, as well as the best forum on the net. It's the only place to have full access to Coach Boyle. He's on every single day. Go to strengthcoach.com, click the Join Now button to get started on your trial. Special thanks to Chris Parrier and the folks over at Perform Better. Remember, right now, huge holiday sale, up to 30% off. Free shipping on select items. Check them out at performbetter.com. Thanks to Coach Boyle and Caleb Heilman for sharing their insights and philosophies into the world of strength conditioning and performance enhancement. Adam Doughty, Tim Robinson, and Train Heroic. Head over to trainheroic.com right now. Start your free 14-day trial. You got to get with this online training thing. It's a great platform. Elias Scarr for the Results Fitness University Business of Fitness segment. Check them out at resultsfitnessuniversity.com. Eric Thagati and Functional Movement Systems. Check them out at functionalmovement.com. My name's Anthony Rena. My new book, Be Like the Best, is at belikethebest.com or continuefit.com. Remember, the book consists of 50 interviews with top fitness professionals, and after each interview is a Be Like, which is just an action step or a challenge that will help you be like the best. That's going to do it for today. Thanks again, and I'll speak to you next time.